I refused to allow the pain of my past to define the footprints of my future.
Welcome to the Bucket List Life Podcast with Trav Bell, the world's #1 bucket list expert. Bucket List Life's mission is to help you get off the treadmill, stop Groundhog Days, hack your habits, and live a regret-free life. Because we know life's way too short not to live your bucket list life. So please welcome your host, Trav Bell, the Bucket List Guy.
Hey Bucket Listers, welcome to another episode of the Bucket List Life podcast. I'm so stoked that you've decided to tune in and either listen or watch to another episode. And what an episode we have got today with the one and only Jeremy Donovan. How are you, brother?
Good to see you, brother. It feels like an eternity, but it's only been 2 weeks.
It's only been a couple of weeks. Yeah. We met at, we were both speakers at the recent ICOT conference, which stands for the International Conference on Thinking. What the hell were we both doing there?
Clearly not thinking, right? But this is the absolute beauty of a conference like this, right? Is that I went there with no expectations, with no agenda really. I was contacted to come to this conference. The title of the conference was "We Are on the Edge of What?" And I literally, at that time, as I spoke at the conference, I was on the edge of the mountains, trekking up Mount Everest. So when the question came through, "We are on the edge of what?" I was like, Everest.
Yeah, there you go. I was on the edge of what the hell do I say in this conference. So I was on the edge of the stage, not knowing who the audience was or anything, but I sat there and I listened to your stuff, and you have such a commanding presence about you. And I mean, we're going to get into it in this episode, guys, about talking about culture, talking about leadership, especially men's leadership. Oh my God. And mate, wherever you go, you command attention, not because you're like, look at me. It's just like the passion, I guess, that comes through. First question, here we go. When you go into another country, when you're crossing something off your bucket list, you fill out an incoming passenger card. You're going into that country. They want to know what you do. They leave you like a little tiny space, and you've got to put your occupation in there. What the hell? Man of many talents. What do you put in there?
Depending on which country I'm going into, I change the title.
Straight on the blacklist.
Yeah. It's one of those things that I've been very I've learned that when I put too much information, it often left too many questions to be able to answered. So if you write consultant, it's too open ended. If you write keynote speaker, people are like, what is it? So one of the most easiest parts that has always given me a really safe passage is an artist. Because at any point I could be a con artist, a bullshit artist, actually an artist, a musician. No.
Yeah, true. Yeah, artist.
It depends where you're going to get yourself out of at any point, right?
Yeah, no. And you've got a hell of a portfolio in that too. Was this right? Like, with the Olympics being on, and we're recording this like in the first week of the Olympics, did you play the didgeridoo in the opening of the 2000 Olympics?
So literally 24 years ago, almost to the day, I'm getting goosebumps now. Like, I was privileged to be one of the 2 didgeridoo players who opened up before Nikki Webster. So, it was before Strawberry Kisses.
No, you and Nikki Webster's fluffer.
Yeah, exactly. Nice. Right.
Please keep going.
I was the opening act. And it was the beginning of what would be the most incredible journey. The reflection has always been, and I think I spoke about it at the ICOT conference, is that less than 500 meters away from the Olympic Stadium is Silverwater Prison, is the MRRC, which in 3 years earlier, I was held in that place.
Shit.
And so there was this amazing reflection that in 3 years, all of a sudden I'm on the world stage, and 3 years earlier that I could never have anticipated the catapult that my life was about to take.
3 years before that, you're in prison, whatever kilometers away, and then 3 years later, you're on the world stage, opening the 2000 Olympics in Sydney, playing the didgeridoo center stage. We're going to get back to that. And let's just say your opening and the part that you played in it, and again with Kathy Freeman, which is unbelievable, and everyone else, was way better than the shit show that we've just seen in Paris, right?
Oh, wow.
Oh, have you seen that?
Yeah, and there's a lot of noise going on about it, and it's really, it's unsettling, like I know France, we've been there, we've traveled there, but this was like the Hollywood blockbuster, of like, how do we make a menage a trois as ugly as possible?
Shit show. Yeah, look, we could talk about that for ages. But what I learned, one of the biggest takeaway, it's not actually called a didgeridoo, is it?
No. So didgeridoo is a white man's term. The actual true origins of the word didgeridoo come from the Irish Gaelic language, where the word didgeray was a pipe player, someone playing the Irish pipes.
Really?
And the word dubh, D-U-B-H, means black in Gaelic. So didgeridoo was a black pipe player, which is what the first Irish convicts saw when they were forced into camps up in the northern parts of Australia. So, in language, for us as Gulga Yaranji or Western Yaranji people, we call it yigi yigi. In Northeast Arnhem Land, it's known as yiraki, and then it has mago, bilk, mamalama, jalamban, dulumbung, gulumbung. So many different names that are all associated with the dreaming story attached to how that instrument came to be. It's just that the didgeridoo, like if we drew a line in Cairns and dragged the didgeridoo all the way across to Broome with a little bit of dip in the central part, the didgeridoo was never played south of that, So it's an instrument that's been adopted by many Aboriginal people across the country. But realistically, the first origins of this instrument started up in Northeast Arnhem Land, in Yirrkala, and then traded east and west and south, from that point.
There we go again, white man stuffing it up. So that's fascinating, dude. Like what? And so, what's the didgeridoo like in Aboriginal culture? How was that performed? As part of a ceremony, part of storytelling? How is it? How is it performed?
The Yigi Yigi, it's a book. It's a wooden book. It's a device to tell the story, and then the dancers would illustrate the story. The Manakai, the songman, the Dawo will sing the traditional song. So the singers narrate the story. The didgeridoo player illustrates along with the dancers. So it was a communication tool to the dancers, to ceremony, because you were constantly listening to duk duk, which is the clapstick, which gives you the rhythm, the song that gives you the narrative of what the story is about, and then the didgeridoo, basically, turn the pages throughout the story. And so, the instrument was used through ceremony. It was used for, just purely for joy, but it also was used as a medicinal tool, as a tool for vibrational therapy. And we know, we have rock paintings where the didgeridoo has been played up against and into the human body, which are, thousands of years old. I want to say like between 7,000 and 12,000 years old. Now,
it's like what a lot of the shamans do.
Yeah. And I mean, this is the thing, is vibrational therapy is not new. Like I know that there's a bit of a new spiritual world, but I really think that we should spell that new like K-N-E-W, because it's not actually new. It's just been re-remembered and brought back to life in the world that we're living in today.
Mate, I love that. What do you get called in to do most of? Like, you're an amazing speaker, you're an artist, you're a consultant, you've got Primal Warrior as well, which we'll talk about a little bit later. What do you get called in most, in the corporate world that we both, especially speakers? Is it more art? Is it more speaking? I
think I'm booked as a speaker, probably more than more than anything, the majority of my work is as a speaker. Then it's probably as an artist, and then as an MC, facilitating events. I often, walk away from a speaking gig with an engagement with that business that then then creates the artwork for the business. But, by and large, it's booked as a motivational, we come into that, motivational bracket, but, our story is about overcoming. It's about resilience. It's about leadership. It's about overcoming adversity. It's about challenges. It's about adapting to change. So I'm always manipulating or molding my story to benefit the audience the most, because there's so many parts that we can constantly tell.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think there could be a better speaker in Australia that speaks around culture than you. When we get going on culture, you'll see this, guys. When we get going on culture, no one illustrates it better than you. And from what I saw, and I only saw the tip of the iceberg in your presentation at ICOT there, but mate, is that the kind of main thing that people get you to do? And do you do a lot of the welcome to countries as well? And you might want to explain that kind of welcome to country. Now, we've got an international audience here, a lot of people in the US, Asia, Europe, and stuff like that. So when we're speaking here in Australia, at most of the bigger conferences, there's a welcome to country. All right. And now normally an Aboriginal fella will get up there and say a welcome to country. Do you want to explain what the welcome to country is, its significance?
Yeah, absolutely.
And, are you mostly doing those or more of your own stuff, or both?
So to break that into two parts, the first part being the welcome to country, the acknowledgement of country. I can only ever welcome somebody to country if they're on Gokla Yaranji country, so where my family connections, tie to.
Where is that in Australia?
But if you draw, our country starts just north of Port Douglas,
right?
Up, so north of Cairns, and then goes as far north as Cooktown, and then west out to Chillago, and that is the traditional country of the Gokla Yaranji people. And we are Gogol Nyugul, so we're Western Yaranji people. But I can only ever welcome somebody to country up on that
your
country.
land.
Now, acknowledging country is something anyone can do.
Right.
As an Aboriginal person, it is cultural protocol. It is not something that is new, that has come with conferences. It has always been the case. If I, as a cultural man, if I'm traveling to Melbourne, to Naarm, I reach out to the Wurundjeri Woiwurrung people, the traditional owners, and say, I'm coming down. I'm a Gokla Yaranji man. I have Yigi with me. I'm going to be at this conference.
You have what with you?
Yigi. Yeah, so didgeridoo.
Okay, there you go again.
I've got the instrument with me.
Hopefully everyone's writing this down, guys. There's going to be a test later.
And, because what happens is often we might have sorry business. So we might have a funeral in some areas. And so as a result of cultural protocols, they may say to me, brother, welcome to our country. We give you safe passage. We want you to be safe. But on this day, we have a funeral. So maybe if you could not sing this song or if you could not play this, it would be, so out of respect, we're constantly seeking permission from others. And that is a practice that has always been going on. For 50,000 years, we never just entered into somebody else's country. And when I say country, we never crossed into someone else's tribal lands without the invitation or without the acknowledgement.
Oh my God. How many countries are there in Australia?
So over 400 different tribal groups. So 400 different tribes. Each tribe had their own individual language. One tribe could have up to about 90 different dialects depending on the diversity and size of that tribal group. So we're talking, they estimate there were over 2 million Aboriginal people across Australia before the invasion, sort of took place. And, today I just saw census details that our population has just reached 1 million Aboriginal people in this country again, so we're about 4% of the population of the country.
Mate, so many questions. So many questions, so little time. How do you know who to reach out to in those countries if you're coming onto their land? You got like a Facebook site? Is there a Facebook group, or you just know? Like, how do you know?
So, we do our research the same way.
Is there a leader or a hierarchy in each land?
There's often a corporation, so there's a corporation that represents each of the different tribal bodies or whatnot. So if I'm coming down to Melbourne, or to Victoria, I will reach out to the contacts I have and say, hey, I'm going to be in Shepparton. Who is the best person for me to talk to? I'm going to be in Melbourne. Who's the best person for me to talk to? I'm going to be in Alice Springs. Who is the best person to talk to? But, so like these days, if you put in Google, who is the traditional owners of Gold Coast, it will tell you that the Kumba people of the Yugambeh language group are the traditional owners. So now I find out, where do I find the Yugambeh or the cultural center? I then call and I say, hey, Yalada, Jeremy Donovan, like I'm a Goga Yalandi man. And all of a sudden there's this acknowledgement, right? So I always tell people, and I would say this for yourself as well, Trav, that you're a man that's connected to country. Like you love the land, you love the ocean. I watch your videos, the ocean is a big part of who you are. And so look at the research, like who are the traditional owners of your favorite surf break? And then all of a sudden,
do that. I feel a real spiritual connect where I surf out in these reefs, and I know there's history there. It's a very spiritual place, and it's like where my mates and I surf, and especially when it's big and unruly and cold, and you just feel, I don't know, you feel safe, you feel supported, you feel like you're on someone else's territory. I feel that. I can see the landscape, and I know it's a very spiritual place. Like I can just drive there and I feel better. I feel like it's off grid a little bit, and I'm going to find that out.
If you get out of your car the next time you go there and you're aware of who the traditional owners are, and you say, I just want to acknowledge the elders, like I'm getting goosebumps now, like because like all of a sudden the love, like the intentional energy that you're putting out is they're hearing this acknowledgement. We believe the environment lives and breathes in this, and we know it does, that it lives and breathes in the same way we do. And so the love we give to the country and to the ancestrals, of the country, it comes back to us, right? So it gives us safe passage around these places.
See what I mean, guys? The passion that comes through Jeremy, and you can't help but get emotional about that. And it gives you goosebumps, doesn't it? So what Jeremy's saying is, if I find out, how do I even say it? The local traditional owners are, Jeremy's saying that I will, because I'll connect with them, I'll get the best waves out there as a result. That's what you're saying, aren't you?
Absolutely. They're going to turn the swirl on for you.
There's got to be some connection about getting better. I'm trying to make light of the situation because it's a really cool topic, and I'm literally going to find that out, man. I'm going to circle back to you on that. I'm super curious now.
I mean, I do this everywhere in the world too.
How dare I not find this shit out, like prior to this combo? Like and here I am using their territory, using their lands, and it just doesn't make sense to not acknowledge.
But it's also our responsibility as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to take you by the hand and give you permission to ask these questions as well. And, this is the part of my life that I love so much is in Australia, for our international visitors, the acknowledgement of the painful past and history of Australia has not necessarily been told that well. And we're a bit afraid in many cases to actually talk about how we move towards a better future where Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and other Australians walk side by side together, where we walk together, we sit together, we speak together, we heal together. And it's my permission to say to you, Trav, let me help you learn this. And it's such a valuable thing because as someone that surfs, I don't surf anymore. I have surfed. The last time I surfed, I was in Hawaii, I was in Maui. And before I walked into the ocean, I acknowledged the traditional owners of that country. And I acknowledge their connection to the tiger shark. I acknowledge their connection to, the ocean, to the reef. And what was amazing about it, as I was paddling out with a local, like a native Hawaiian, all of a sudden we saw a break in the water and he's like, oh, it's sweet, bro. Like it's dolphins, but it wasn't. It was a massive tiger shark. And this tiger shark, literally, I was on a 12-foot mow, and this tiger shark came up next to me, like rolled onto its side with the darkest of eyeballs and looked me straight in the face. Now, I've never surfed again because I was like, that's the closest I ever need to be to a tiger shark that was that big. And I felt this really beautiful connection. I've since...
Now I'm afraid to say anything to the traditional owners because I don't want to charge.
To me, that was it. I was never a good surfer. Now, I've never felt like we dive, so when we go diving on the reef for crayfish, for crab, for any of the... We see the tiger sharks out there. They're there. We know they're there. They're an amazing, beautiful creature. Obviously we come with, incredible amounts of respect. And so the same goes, like the acknowledgement that shark, and when I paddled back in, I was speaking to the brother's grandmother and she was like, you are so blessed, like that relationship you now have with that tiger shark, to the point where I got a tiger shark tattooed on my shoulder, because
there you go. Yeah, right.
of this relationship now that I have, that I bonded with this animal in that moment. So I was never a good surfer, so it was easy to give that up.
Oh, that's amazing. That's an amazing story. And 99.99% of us would look at that story in a completely different way. But you've got this connection. That's such a really interesting perspective. I love that. Mate, where did you grow up?
So I grew up predominantly on the northern beaches of Sydney. That was the predominant place that I was growing up. I was lost. As a kid growing up, I was really lost. I didn't have any cultural foundation around me, having been grown up, sort of away from Aboriginal culture, away from cultural identity, that the Polynesian culture really formed my early identity as a young man growing up, that I really, were defined by a connection to what the Māori know as tangata whenua. I was, ultimately whangaid, which is the word for adoption, to a Māori family.
And when we're saying Maori family, that's Maori New Zealand
absolutely.
family.
So Indigenous people of New Zealand. And the word whangaid is a Māori word for adoption, which gives you place within family, right?
Were you legally adopted?
No, never been.
Yeah, right. We often, as speakers and as coaches, our mess becomes our message.
Wounded healings.
Right. Yeah. Not that we go up and do therapy on stage or anything like that, or do we? But, mate, talk to me about, like, you got foster care, you got juvenile detention, adult incarceration. Talk to me about the journey, and I know this is a big part of your talk, so you're not a stranger to it. And there's so many lessons that you've extracted out of your upbringing that has helped so many people, So just walk me through the timeline there, and how do you arrive at, 3 years before the opening of the Sydney Olympics? Being incarcerated, and then we'll talk about how you got out of it and what you did around it.
So I think the best way to talk about it is from the perspective of today. I look back and go, I refused to allow the pain of my past to define the footprints of my future. And that became the premise for, how I've been able to transform my life from the Sydney Olympics, because everything is about not being defined by those chapters that were heartbreaking, but actually those chapters became the inspiration. And what I've found is that pain and sadness can often be a really powerful foundation to stand on if you learn to live with it and not let it control you. So I acknowledge it. It's tough, 26 families before 5 years old, the physical abuse at different times, the sexual abuse people were exposed to, then finding yourself at 13 years old before the magistrate's court for the first time. and going, who am I? What am I? And how do I get to where I want to go in my life? And as an Aboriginal boy, my identity became defined by incarceration, because the narrative, the deficit narrative, the poverty narrative was pain and prison. And so tragically in this country, as I mentioned, as Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people, we make up 4% of the total population of this country. Yet in our juvenile prisons around the country, we're about 76% of the kids that are incarcerated are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Islander.
You're fucking kidding,
In
really?
some places in the Northern Territory or Western Australia, at many times, 100% of the kids in jail are black, are Aboriginal or Torres Strait Island kids. We are about 57% of the adult prison, and women are the fastest growing population into women's prisons in this country. We are the most overpopulated, overrepresented race in prisons in this country. And it's tragic, to be just 4% of the total population. So the narrative of prison is such a pathway. So much so, as a young Aboriginal man, it is easier to get to prison than it is to get to grade 12 at school. And I mean, think about that you have a child that you were just talking before this started in year 12. So the pathway to prison was so much easier than it is to get to school. And that's a ludicrous position in a country that is the lucky country. We call it the luck. But I always say that, yes, like you, bro, I've seen the world. This is such a beautiful country. We are so privileged in Australia, but it is not lucky for everyone.
Where are we getting it? Why are they strange? How are we getting it wrong, mate? Like what's happening? Why are those statistics so fucked up?
So poverty, the one thing that people in Australia are not good at acknowledging is that poverty exists. So we like to report it in the media as low socioeconomic because it makes us feel a bit safe. That's a lower socioeconomic area. We don't say that area has poverty, because when we actually name poverty, it means we are going to have to do something as humanity. That comes back to that word I spoke about, like meliorism, which is humans can create the world, turn the world into a better place. Is the only way that we address poverty is people. And we have to go, how do we heal what is broken? And so you look at places like Alice Springs, for example, that has had so much media attention, all these forced curfews, like military curfews, because the kids are out of control. But the kids are broken. The kids are lost. The men and the women are in prison. These kids are in overcrowded environments. These kids have had forced assimilation forced upon them. They're trying to navigate a world of two worlds where culture and the culture of this country are not meeting. They're not coming together yet in unison. And so how do we get back to a point where we give people worthiness again, and self-worth and self-belief and self-love? Because the poison of alcoholism and drug abuse, which we know in places, no matter where you are in the world, where poverty exists, alcohol, drugs, domestic violence, sexual abuse, physical violence, it is so prevalent. And so in those places, which tend to be overpopulated with low socio families, so we're seeing it today with the African migrant community, that they're put into poverty-based communities, and then in their house, they have a cultural identity that our world doesn't want to, the majority of the community don't want to accept. They say, well, you can't be like that. You should be lucky to live in Australia.
But also, it's not about, you say poverty or low socio, it's not about just throwing more money at it, is it?
No, it's about listening.
What has to come, sure, money helps, but what else has to come with it? What's the essential missing ingredient? Like if you had charge over this situation and you're an influential voice, mate, people listen to you. What would be the moves? What would be the big chess pieces that you'd move or you'd change, to get that change, to lessen or halt this systemic problem?
So I think the Victorian government, albeit, the criticism that the Victorian government got, through the crisis of COVID, under the Daniel Andrews government, and all of that chaos that you guys were subjected to, the Victorian government and Parliament instated something called the York, which is an Indigenous body, that is advocating policy and that is affecting the lives of Aboriginal people. So it's Aboriginal people designing policies, having conversation at the highest level of bureaucracy to design policy that is best suited to the people they are representing. And these are Aboriginal people from various parts of Victoria that are saying, this is what my family or my people need.
That's not happening in other states.
No. South Australia.
You're kidding. Is this what we were voting? Is this what we were voting on?
This is what the vote for the voice would have actually established on a federal pathway. So this is where essentially there were two parts to the vote, the referendum. There was one to amend the constitution that would acknowledge Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people as the first Australians. It would make the concept terra nullius null and void, because terra nullius said no man's land. Because at that time, those people that invaded, colonized, whatever you want to say.
Say invaded. It's fine. They did.
They called it terra nullius. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people were not classed as humans of this country until the 1967 referendum. So in 1967, there was a referendum to say Aboriginal people should not be classed as flora and fauna. They should be classed as humans.
Fucking hell. I know this stuff, but I've never had it explained so bluntly and clearly. It's unreal. Are you kidding? Fuck.
So 55 years ago, it's Aboriginal people were protesting on the streets to say, we are more than animals. We are more than plants and animals. We are not we're not part of the botany. We are part of the humanity. And, the referendum that failed because it became political, and a referendum is supposed to be a non-political position. But the moment it was not bipartisan supported, so the moment there was no bipartisan, it became political because, it became political football. People didn't understand what the voice, it wasn't articulated very well.
Wasn't marketed well, no.
It was done very poorly. And, that's because it was, it was funded by different political parties, different factions. It looked scary. I think there is not an Australian in this country today that couldn't agree with me when I said, are Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island people the first people that were here? Yes. Everyone's going to say yes. Okay, well, let's change this clause in the 1900 document.
That kind of makes fucking sense.
All right. Now, the voice is a nominated parliament that would advocate policy that would represent the different parts of the country. So there'd be representation from Cape York, representation from Northern Territory, both North and South, South Australia, Victoria, WA, and they would advocate to the federal government on what needs to happen to cause effect and create.
That got really political, didn't it?
Absolutely.
As to who the leader's going to be and what was their agenda, and it's like other politicians.
Yeah, absolutely. But the reality is one of the biggest things that I've always driven with my own voice and the stage that I've been given permission to speak on, because, the great voices that protested the streets to become more than flora and fauna gave me position to speak my mind on stage and to be confronting at times, but be soft and gentle and say, I'm not causing guilt. I just want you to see and feel what we feel, and actually use my voice to say to the government and to the policies to say, stop doing to us, do with us. So let's design a policy for Aboriginal people, with Aboriginal people, for Aboriginal people. And, like, because we're listening to what our family is saying, that I have the privilege to go home back to country. And then I also have the privilege to stand on ASX 100, build, tier one businesses, political platforms, and take the message of my family, but also the message of many Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people around the country.
Have you been tapped on the shoulder to lead the charge, mate?
You know what? The one thing I learned, the closer I got to politics, was that I could actually affect more change from the stages that I was standing on, because I believe that there's more people power in corporate institutions and foundations to actually say, the more people and the more momentum we get to say, let's start listening. Let's whoa, that's a new concept. Let's listen, let's listen to what people have to say and cause effect on that. I guess at times there were, people were often concerned about my criminogenics, but the beauty of my past is I stand there and say it. Yes, I was incarcerated. Yes, I was a violent offender. Yes, I was a car thief. Yes, I was a dishonest person, through my younger teenage life. But I wasn't bad. I was a product of my environment.
The system.
And today, I'm a product of my environment.
How's the Victorian, what do you call them? The Victorian...
Yeah, so the Victorian Treaty Council, but...
How are they travelling with their... Are they travelling well?
The Victorian government is the closest government in the country to coming to creating a treaty pathway for Aboriginal people of Victoria.
Oh, Victoria. What are we going to do to get that going in the other states?
So, the narrative is starting. So we had the Treaty Commission instated in Queensland. We had, one of the most incredible Aboriginal barristers appointed to lead as the commissioner of the treaty up here in Queensland. I know that New South Wales is advancing, and South Australia. And so I know that we are moving towards a place where healing happens and then treaties can start to be navigated. And treaties are very powerful negotiation tools whereby they will give the ability for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to have self-determination over the use of our lands and our native title spaces. Because Eddie Mabo, one of our most significant leaders, advocated for land rights. And he led all the way to the Mabo legislation and Mabo, but instead we were given native title. And so it's very different. Like, native title in many cases is like the horse of Troy. Yeah, you can have it, but it's a 99-year lease.
So talk to me about that, because that happens in Indonesia. It happens in, a lot of countries around the world. It doesn't happen in Australia though, does it?
No. So, native title is still, you look at, the best way to look at it is have a look at the destruction and devastation. And look, I'm not against mining. I'm just saying that have a look at the devastation and destruction, because right now in my office, I have a laptop, I have an iPad, I have a mobile, I have so I understand that we need minerals to create the technology that we're utilizing. But there is big businesses, FMG, Fortescue, Lang Hancock's business, so Gina Reinhardt's business, you've got BHP, all these things. Now, there's still billions and billions and billions of dollars turning over. And they are still determining how much royalty they pay the people that have native title determination. We saw the devastation of the burp, where Rio Tinto, I believe, and please, I'm not out there to cause offense on that, but, the Joko Gorge, where it was blowing up, and it destroyed, devastated Aboriginal artwork that was, thousands of years old. Yeah. And the repercussions are, I will fix you up with some little compensation. That native title still gives the rights to the business over the rights of the people. The likes of Fortescue, I know, are going through legal battles at the moment whereby they're saying, no, we've paid enough royalties. We're not paying you anymore. And they also want to say, and with the money we give you, you have.
And that's is an elected royalty that is paid, or is that any part of legislation?
I believe that it has to be negotiated at any point, But the reality is that there's still big businesses dictating how that royalty is getting delivered and dispersed.
And how much. And yeah, okay.
You know, it's one of those things that, you know, I've seen it in America and I've seen it in Canada with Native American communities that have their land rights. And when you have land rights, you have the determination to use your land however you want. And we know that in America, First Nations people have been able to develop casinos for better or worse.
There's a lot of billion-dollar Indians.
Yeah,
that's for sure.
And that's, you know, and that's the thing is that, you know, I've been up into the Great Lakes region and spent lots of time up there with First Nations people, and I've seen the amazing impacts of economic wealth. I've also seen the devastating impacts of economic, you know, wealth when it's not done right, you know, and addiction and drug abuse and violence and gambling, you know, but when it's done right, you're seeing people that are becoming the most educated doctors, going to the best universities, that are now becoming voices in their own rights.
Now, our brothers over in New Zealand, the Maoris seem to have, just my perception, the Maoris seem to have done it well.
So the Treaty of Waitangi.
Is that because the white men were white men who landed in New Zealand are just shit scared of big Maoris, or just fear and intimidation did that job?
The Māori have been, you know, they were staunch warriors and they fought for the Treaty of Waitangi, you know, and the Treaty of Waitangi gave Māori people a position of power in Parliament, you know, from a very early time.
Early stages,
the difference, the disparity between Australia and New Zealand is the first Māori doctor graduated 100 years before our first Aboriginal doctor. And that's the difference, you know. So I believe that we're in a landscape of change, a significant landscape of change.
Well, that's it. We weren't doing welcome to countries, you know, especially in speaker world that I certainly have been involved in. You know, how long has welcome to countries been? You know, especially, you know, you go and fly on Qantas, which we do. You know, you go and fly on a lot. You know, about 10 years. Yeah,
it's about 10 years when it started to become really vocal and saying people need to be acknowledged. You know.
Yeah, and rightfully so. So what do you think, are we on the path to some sort of reconciliation, and what does reconciliation look like to you?
So I believe that we got the word wrong with reconciliation, you know, because when I think of the word reconciliation, I think of like two people that had a union, now they've had an argument, and we come to have a reconciliation. We reconcile our differences. But the truth is, there was never an agreement in the beginning. So what we need to create is a conciliation. We need to come together to create. And that's what the benefit of these treaty conversations will be from, you know, state positions, but just even friend to friend, you know, me and you, like everything I can impart on from a cultural perspective of wisdom to you, to your audience, to people around the world is coming together. So the more we cause change of listening, whereby as Aboriginal people, I'm not presenting with my trauma and my anger. I'm actually saying with absolute love, I understand that it has been aggressive in the past. At times, you know, people have been confronted by people's pain, and that's fair too. But the reality with me, I'm 6'2", I'm 110 kilos, I'm a big guy, but I am the most gentle of, you know, people, and I want to love people with culture, you know, like, so I want people to say, walk with me and feel what I feel. Hold my hand and let me talk you through a painting. Let me talk you through language. Let me talk you through dance. Let me talk you through country. Feel what I feel.
But also, man, like there's adopted white guy, you know, like England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales. I did my genealogy, you know, during COVID and discovered where I was from. And it's England, Ireland, Scotland, Wales, exactly like the fucking song says. There'd be generational guilt on our end too, right? That's what I feel. And I dare say I'm speaking on behalf of a lot of other people who are watching and listening to this. There's generational guilt that we feel so shit, but so we don't know what to do. We come together, you and I feel like saying, sorry, dude, on behalf of all of us white dickheads, I'm really sorry. I'm really fucking sorry. fuck, I wish I was there. I wouldn't have fucking done it. It would have been fucking different, mate. You go like, brother.
But that's the thing, right? So I see this a lot, right? So, and I've been part of the conversations with both here in Australia and in the United States. So I've been part of the country, part of this population whereby I've met Australians that have gone over to America and they've seen, they've been out to the Kenyan lands and the Hopi Navajo communities, Dene community, and they go, man, it is horrible what happened to the Native Americans. And I'm like, whoa.
Fucking so bad.
But then they don't have the same compassion here because I believe there is ancestral guilt. And then I've been with Americans whereby they've said, man, it's horrific what's happened over, but they're not seeing the same trail of tears that, have been written about. And so it's our responsibility to really just sit together, to talk together, to walk together, to really feel together and I don't like the position of anger, I can stand on stage with absolute poise and conviction and say, come with me, come with me on this journey.
You're not fighting, you're not combative, you're not angry, you're just like loving, and you're coming from that abundant place. It's so much.
Listen to my words and feel my words, that if I'm confronting as a personality, close your eyes and just feel what I have to say. And, it's a really beautiful journey that I get to take people on. And that's, as a speaker, whether it's acknowledgement of country, whether it's welcome, whether it's as a keynote speaker, whether it's, that's it, just feel the words with me.
Guys, if you're watching and listening to this and you're engaged as much as I am, and I'm learning with every single word here, you have no doubt that, Jeremy's a leader in this space. And when he talks the truth, you can't help but listen, right? And I bet you guys are picking that up right now. So I want to just really appreciate you, mate. Like you are such a good voice for your community, Aboriginal Australia. It's so cool. We're not done yet, though. I've never heard anyone, like I said at the top, I've never heard anyone talk about culture like you do. What is culture? And what do we need to learn? Because culture, especially in corporate and especially just, what do we need to learn about culture to make our culture better?
So culture is a way of being. I think, this is one of the beautiful parts about working within Executive Australia and Corporate Australia is actually addressing what is your culture. And often I start at the top in terms of if I'm going to do a keynote speaking engagement about culture, I often want to say, well, can I please speak to the seniors of this business first? And I want to understand what's culture, what kind of culture do you come from? And that means what kind of leader are you? What kind of voice are you? What do you see when you walk into your business? Because culture starts at the top. Culture starts with me. When I break it down, is that I come from the Gulga Yaranji people, that culture has influenced me immensely. Then within my family, I have the responsibility to create a culture within my partner, within my children, within my stepchildren. I have a responsibility and an obligation to them to create a culture. And my children will represent the culture I installed in them. And they will evolve and they will develop and they will have an abbreviation of their own form. But in many cases, they are a representation of how I've led with them. A really big thing for executives is that I speak about, from a cultural perspective, when I sit with my elders and when I sit with our leaders, we don't stand on stage and dictate to the audience. That we sit in a circle where the circular motion is meaning everyone is equal, that no one has a higher status than anybody else, that the voice that we are hearing is the voice of validity. It is the voice that is, and as that moves around the circle, everybody is allowed to see everyone, right? So, and that is a really beautiful thing, is that I often speak to executive leadership and say that if there is an amiss, if there is a communication, it is often how you are communicating. And that can be confronting to the CEO of an ASX company, because he's like, what do you mean? I'm a great leader. I'm the CEO. And I'm like, say, well, that's the thing, is that you're confronted by me saying that I'm not challenging your leadership. I'm not challenging your intelligence. I'm challenging sometimes how you're trying to communicate is not being heard the way that you were intending on. And so how about we sit together and we actually, and I've had this incredible privilege and I was talking about it this morning, actually. I've had the opportunity to work really closely to Andrew Forrest, Twiggy.
Really? Okay.
I was the CEO of one of his non-for-profits at one point.
For those that are overseas, explain who he is.
So Twiggy's our richest man in the country, owns Fortescue, FMG, is a billionaire. I've had the opportunity.
He's a miner.
Yeah, he's a mining magnate, iron ore. I've worked with Sir Frederick and Sir David Barclay, who own the Ritz-Carlton in London, the London Telegraph, one of the biggest aristocracies outside of the British family. Richard Branson. I've, sat with Nancy Rockefeller, so I've had this incredible opportunity to work with billionaires. And what I learned, without trying to demoralize any of those individuals, is that every one of them was so different. And in fact, it was Sir Frederick Barclay that I'm really happy to talk about, because this guy was one of the most, and still is, still living today, although his twin brother Sir David passed away, was one of the most incredible men that I ever had the privilege to share story with, and really intimate time and intimate conversation, to the point where I flew on his private jet with him from London to Miami and down into Costa Rica, into the jungle, to see a plant medicine guy down in the jungle of Costa Rica. Like,
you did ayahuasca with Barclay.
No, but it was simply but there was like a medicine man down there that was creating jungle medicine. Tragically, I believe he passed away through the COVID situation. But I asked him what was the most important part of business, and he said the people. And that was it. I watched him greet the gardener. I watched him greet the people that were cleaning the house. I watched him greet and acknowledge the people that were looking or tending to the horses in the stables. And he said, that's it.
Are these common traits at that echelon of people?
No. Sometimes they're demanding. I also witnessed the polar opposite, where you work for me, you do what I fucking tell you. If you don't agree with what I'm saying, then get out of my fucking way, and that.
Tell me, mate, this is interesting, because the next question I had was, who, in the timeline of your life, because you could have gone south. I mean, you're there at one stage, but you've gone north. Who have been the best or the most significant positive influencers in your life, in the timeline of your life? I'm sure there's been some amazing ones.
Absolutely. First of all, I would say, my grandfather, first and foremost, my grandfather and grandmother, incredible. The imparting of cultural wisdom and knowledge and ways of life that shaped the young version of who I would become. And then it was Kathy Freeman winning the 400 meters.
I'm speaking on stage with her next week.
So,
can't wait.
And Kathy is a Guga Yalandi person. So Kathy is second cousins to me on my father's side. In fact, it was my uncle, it was my dad's brother that did her wedding, that came down to Victoria and married her. So she inspired me. So the night that Kathy Freeman won that 400 meters, I was playing didgeridoo in a corporate suite before the Australian ambassador to Switzerland. It was the first time I was ever honest with a stranger about my life, about incarceration and, the criminal background I'd come from. They were asking if I was interested in coming overseas, and I told them that, no, I'm not allowed. I need 7 years of no convictions. I couldn't get a passport. All of a sudden, I was given a diplomatic invitation to go to Geneva. So I would have to say the ambassador to Switzerland at that time that gave me the invitation to the world was, albeit he doesn't know probably how impactful that was, but it would become the catalyst for the world for me. There's Deborah and Greg Foreman, two of the most beautiful humans I ever met in my life. And I met them at my first ever art exhibition. They bought a painting off me, which was called Yorpo, which was about the first ceremony I ever sat in with my grandparents. And I said to them, if I want to see this painting again. And they didn't expect that I was going to reverse charges a phone call from LA airport saying, can you come pick me up? I've got nowhere to stay and I want to see my painting. They became mum and dad. I still call them mum and dad, to this day, mama and papa. They are, two of the most, Deborah, an escrow agent, which is, she sells houses, big business houses. Greg was ex-stocks trader into, a whole lot of, spirituality. He gave me permission as a man to explore spirituality, and understand that in doing this, introduced me to the world of ayahuasca, which then opened the doors to Wachuma or San Pedro, to many of the DMT and the plant medicines from around the world that I've had the incredible privilege of sitting with some of the greatest medicine men and exploring the depths of my damage through the medicine of the plants. And today I look around and my kids are one of the greatest influences in my life because I've realized how much I can impact their life, love that they give me. And then, of course, I've got amazing people around me, and we gather, the more conscious we become. Trav, like the moment we met, I was like, I know that we are connected, like
definitely connection there straight away.
And it's no disrespect to the other presenters or speakers from the conference, but there's none of them that I've been in touch with.
Yeah.
And that's just humans. Like we find your vibe attracts your tribe. And, one of my good brothers from Primal Warrior, he said that to me, your vibe attracts your tribe, and your vibe was part of my tribe. It was like, yeah, I see a brother here. And then we build this army of brotherhood and sisterhood of people that collective energy creates amazing change.
And that's what you're trying to, that's what, going on a Primal Warrior too is, I dare say that's what the level of vulnerability, the level of sharing, the level of straight talk is what you're trying to achieve through Primal Warrior. Just to explain what Primal Warrior initiative is all about, mate.
Yeah, so Primal Warrior .pro, a business that was created by myself, Jeffrey Morgan, he's a Gumori man, amazing mindset coach, and Aboriginal guy with a life very similar to mine, 17 years in jail as a bank robber, to then, sort of an amazing guy. Tahira Narano, who was a Maori person, came across to Australia as an exotic dancer, as a stripper, built businesses with hairdressing salons and cafes, an amazing entrepreneur, but very deeply spiritual brother. And then Tops, who lives in Dubai, is a fitness coach, a boxing coach, a strength conditioner, a business coach, but was a Serbian refugee who came to Australia in a time where his family fled the war and fled communism and came to Australia a chance of a better life, found himself involved in criminogenics and violence, but has been able to pull himself out of that to be able to help heal and excel people to be the best versions of themselves. So we're all almost 50 years old, the four of us. So there's 200 years of life between us. And we created an online platform whereby, people pay a subscription base every 5 nights a week. So, we have Sunday sessions, then we have a Monday night, which is a premium group, which is for business and entrepreneurial values. And then Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday is going through the functions of 2.0 version of men, addressing all of our, addressing things that men have not been great at doing. Right now we're talking about mindset and mentality we're going into in the month of August. We just come off the month of goals, dreams, aspirations, and giving men the chance to journal and write down, pick up, I've got books and books of writing and journaling. So writing down my thoughts, capturing my thoughts, teaching men to be vulnerable in their thoughts, how to express emotions, looking at the toxic personalities that males are presenting with. And, this is not a cure to domestic violence. And we know that that's a scourge on our nation at the moment. But, this is, men have a solution to healing men as a result of, if we turn up and be the best versions of ourselves, if we call out the toxic bullshit and actually build better versions of men and give men a space to create a brotherhood. I always say that when two men meet each other at a really vulnerable space and they love each other, they acknowledge each other. They like when I heard your story, and I saw that, there was a connection. I was like, far out. Like, man, I've got so much love and admiration, for the narrative that you were talking about. I was like, I love you, bro. Like that was, and when men love each other like that, in a non-French Olympics Open, sort of example, but but actually genuinely see, it's such a deep love. And it's when men love, like men can heal. And that's the same, when in a relationship, when men turn up and love a woman who has all of this, baggage, damage, all of these different things, sometimes they don't know what to do with it because it's confronting. And so our natural default is to sabotage things, and, both men and women do it. We don't know what to do with this amazing feeling. We often blow it up. And so teaching people how to regulate emotions and giving men permission to be the best version of themselves. And masculinity, primal warrior, being a warrior does not mean being violent.
As you know, I coach a lot of other coaches and other speakers for that matter. And I'm always saying that, and I have said for years, as a coach, you're always coaching inadvertently, you're coaching your former self. So what I'm hearing is you're being the coach that you really wish you had in your life back in the day, right? A prime example of a vulnerable but put together man. And on that note, mate, I will wrap things up and I've got a question for you. Imagine a stadium full of people, which you've already been amongst, so you don't have to imagine it that hard. You got a raised stage and a big booming microphone. 2 questions. 1, what would you love to say, and who do you choose to be in the audience?
It's easy. The first choice for the audience would be my grandparents, for them to see what they gave me and the permission that it gave me. Because my grandfather saw the beginnings of it, and I don't know that he could have ever anticipated just how amazing it was going to be. And so to have my grandfather and grandmother there in the audience, to have the likes of the Nelson Mandelas, the Martin Luther Kings, because it was their bravery of saying, I have a dream, and that have given me as a colored person permission to stand on stages and to elevate, my voice with love and compassion. And the next person and the next thing, what would I say? I would say, close your eyes and listen. Feel what I have to say. Don't listen, just feel. In fact, it's not even needed to understand the words, but just feel what I have to say. And, that would be how I started, in a room full of, perfect strangers, in a stadium full of strangers, knowing that you see it. I can't avoid the emotion attached to my grandparents. So I never want to, they gave me permission to fly when society had cut the wings off my back.
Mate, I know you're doing them proud. And can you not play small from here on?
Yeah.
I'm just going to challenge you on that. You're a hell of a leader, mate, a hell of an example, a hell of a voice, and very passionate. There's so much more, I feel, that you need to be doing in this life. And I am really blessed that you've jumped on and given me your time. You've got me, fuck you. That you've jumped on and shared and been vulnerable, of course. It's part of your DNA. You can't help it. And led the way. Mate, you've got me thinking. I'll get so much more out of this podcast than I thought I ever would. So thank you, brother. And I can't wait to, hang out in person up there on the Goldie, because it's freezing down here. I've got to find any excuse to get up there right now. Mate, how can people connect with you?
So you can do it either via the website, jeremydonovan.com. You can jump on my Instagram, which is only new. I only started Instagram really back in March when I, decided to go Everest. But that's Jeremy Donovan Dreaming. That's the handle. or LinkedIn is the other social network, which is just my name, Jeremy Donovan. There's nothing that, people in the audience can't ask. Obviously, I love doing what I do, whether it be creating the artworks, whether it be able to, speak.
Go on there, God. I mean, just go to your website. We're going to put all the links in the show notes too. Have a look at Jeremy's artworks too, guys. Like, it's just next level, like on point Aboriginal art at its finest. And I love the work. You're about to go and do some works.
Yeah,
you were saying
I'm just
before.
going to create. I'm working with a street artist, and we're going to do about 50 to 60 meters of murals across Palm Island, painting elders of the community, landscapes of the community, the environment, the reef, the coral, the whales, the dolphins, so I'm...
How long is it going to take you?
It's going to be about 3.5 weeks, I reckon, of just nonstop painting the paths. So I can't wait, But aside from anything, I'm back on country. I'm back with family. I'm back, doing something for community that lift the spirits, to say that as a population, we are so much more than terra nullius.
Love that. Guys, connect with Jeremy. You know why now. Mate, thank you so much for being on the
Thank you, brother.
podcast. Thanks, brother.
Thanks, brother. Take care. Much love.
Thanks so much for listening to the Bucket List Life podcast with the world's #1 bucket list expert, Trav Bell. For more great content, go to www.thebucketlistguy.com. We'll see you next time.